and welcome to So Much More, a women's health and wellbeing program which is produced with the assistance of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. In the studio with me today, I have Christine Parnell, and she is one of our regular panel or round table discussion members, and she is a local community identity from around the Shepparton area. Christine has got a
Bachelor of Homemakers.
Bachelor of Arts.
Bachelor of Arts.
Majoring in sociology, politics and history.
Yeah. As
well as having a certificate for in optical dispensing. So welcome to the studio. Thank you for coming and joining us today, Christine.
Yay!
Yay! Yay! Now today on our program, we are going to be talking about the concept of blooming where you're planted or growing where you're planted. And so that's to do with basically, even when your life might not have turned out exactly the way that you wanted it to be, you still do your best, you still grow, you become an amazing person, you do things with what you've got, you make the best out of what you've got. So we've had a few women on in the last few weeks that have shown examples of doing that. So here we have another one who is Christine Parnell. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So Christine, can you tell us a little bit about where you came from?
Yeah, well, I came from a small country town in the United States of America called Quincy, Washington, in the state of Washington, which is distinct from the city of Washington, D.C. by about 3,000 or 4,000 miles. Washington, D.C. being the capital city of the United States in the District of Columbia, similar to Canberra being in the Australian Capital Territory, Washington State being a state on the west coast of America, bordering Canada, and to the south, Oregon, and to the east, Idaho, and to the west, the Great Pacific Ocean. And my little town was located, or still is, located halfway between Spokane and Seattle.
Now, how did you come to Australia?
Well, when I was 16, I decided that things weren't so cool in Quincy. It's, little tiny town, 3,000 people. Everybody knows everybody's business, and, I thought I wasn't very popular, and how it is when you're 16, sometimes, or at least in my case, it was like nobody likes me, everybody hates me, and there aren't enough worms to eat, so I'll come to Australia. No, actually, I applied to be a Rotary Exchange student, and because I was a good student and, a person of reasonable character, I was chosen to come to Shepparton and go to Shepparton Girls High School, and I was hosted by 12 marvelous families in Shepparton for about a month each, and so I spent 12 months in Australia as a Rotary Exchange student, and while I was here, I met this darling, gorgeous, sweet, wonderful Australian boy, or young man, I guess you could say, and while the rules of Rotary Exchange were no drinking, no driving, no dating, I thought, well, 2 out of 3 isn't bad, and I met him, not long before I was due to go home anyway. So, by the time it was time for me to go back to America, we'd come to a bit of an understanding, and the first letter I got from him, which was arrived about 3 days after I'd got back from Australia, because back in those days the posting was really a good service, it was a letter saying, please will you marry me? So, I wrote back because I was 17 and knew everything. I wrote back and said, oh yeah, sure, that sounds like a great idea. And so we hatched our plot, and about 6 months after that, he wrote to my folks and asked if we could get engaged, and they wrote back and said, no. No. As you would. And, but if you're ever wanted to come for a visit, of course you'd be welcome. So he sold everything that was precious to him, and 6 weeks later he turned up, and 3 weeks after that we got married. And so I ended up moving back here to Australia.
So how long have you actually been in Australia? May I know?
About 44, 45 odd years, some of them more odd than others. So, yeah, around about that. Yeah.
Have you noticed any cultural differences? You wouldn't necessarily expect there to be many cultural differences, but what have you noticed?
Yeah, well, you wouldn't expect, because the American culture is ubiquitous, and you would think that, there wouldn't be that much difference. But yes, definitely cultural differences. I noticed a very strong ethnocentricity, which meant that the Australians didn't really appreciate me saying, well, the American way is better.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And it took me many years to figure that out, that was not something that you did, because, being an American, we're known for being thick.
You can say that. I'm not allowed to.
That's right. But, look, plenty of Australians told me how thick I was. So, that was the way it goes, heck, if I'd had a dollar for every time some Australian said to me, Yankee, go home, I could have paid for a plane ticket.
That's actually kind of sad, isn't it?
Well, it's unfortunate, but it's part of the ethnocentrism, and, rightly so. Australians think that their way is the best way because it is the best way. Americans think that their way is the best way because it is the best way. We all think that our own way of doing things is the best way of doing it. And so we're all, very ethnocentristic, and that's fine as long as you don't push your own ethnocentrism onto someone else.
So was that a lesson that you had to learn yourself?
That was a huge lesson for me to learn. And, once I figured out what was going on, and that took a long time, I was a much happier person. Because I wasn't hurting people's feelings anymore, and I wasn't getting my feelings hurt anymore.
How has the technology changes affected you?
Well, the changes in technology have really been amazing over the last 40-odd years. When I first came to Australia, I didn't think I'd ever get a chance to go back to America. I thought I was immigrating to Australia and that I would never get the opportunity to go home again. So, because that was the way it was back then. If you immigrated to Australia, that was it, because we were so isolated. To get a phone call to my parents was something like $2 or $3 a minute to talk to them. We used to save up and go to the neighbors who had a telephone. We didn't even have a telephone when we were first married. It took us probably 5 years before we ever even got our own telephone. So we would go to the neighbors and we'd give them, $25 and say, please, can we use your telephone? And we'd speak to the operator and say, we've got $25 here. Please, let us know when we've used up the money. And the operator would come on and say, you've got, a minute left. And then we would say our goodbyes. And that was really, really hard. Most of our communication was through letter writing. And my mother was a wonderful, wonderful correspondent. I was a very, very poor correspondent, largely due to the fact that I was, having children and, I was busy and I was very, very homesick. And I didn't really want my parents to know how homesick I was. That would have not helped them at all. They were sad that I had moved so far away from them. So for them to understand how homesick I was would not have been a good thing. How
did the homesickness actually affect you? Like, were there physical symptoms, or what was happening? What's involved with homesickness?
Well, for me, I found it totally debilitating. I just found it, all I wanted to do was sleep my life away. I was very, very depressed. I was very homesick. I found it very difficult to look after my home, to look after my children, to look after my husband. It was, very, very hard. And it was basically thanks to some wonderful friends and people who cared about me that, got me through it. The big thing that finally got me totally cured of the homesickness, though, was I was blessed enough to have a trip back to America, and my little brother was saying to me, it never surprised me that you moved to Australia. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, don't you remember when we were little kids and Mom sent us to the grocery store and we went to get some milk and some butter and some bread and stuff like that. And on our way to the milk section, we were looking around and we went past the meat section, and there was this box in the meat section and it had a map of Australia on it, and in the middle of the map it said meat from Australia. And he said to me, and you looked at that map of Australia and you said to me, one day I'm going to live there. Now, we were 7 and 8 when I said that to him. And he said, so I was never surprised that you moved to Australia. And on that same trip, my mom disclosed to me that after World War II, she and Daddy were newlyweds, and Daddy had said to her, what if we were to emigrate to Australia? Be like the 10-pound pommies, only I think they had a similar deal for Americans to emigrate, and go to Australia and start a whole new life. And my mom just didn't feel that she could cope with that. She just knew in her heart of hearts that she couldn't be separated from her original family by that much distance. As it was, she was separated from her original family by 150 miles, and it might as well have been 4,000 miles back in those days, because getting on the train and going home to her family was a big deal back then, But anyway, she refused to immigrate to Australia, and so they settled in Quincy. And so when I found that out, I was like, the shutters just opened up and the light came in, and it was like I was meant to be here. For so many years, I had struggled with the idea, did I really belong here? Was I really supposed to have come here? Was I meant to be somewhere else? Did I jump the gun? Because I was only 18 when we got married, and, we were very young and very, very much in love, and love conquers everything. But then you have these questions, did I do the right thing? Have I done the right thing? Should I have done this, or should I have done something else? Once I knew that I should have been born here, it was like, yes, this is where I'm supposed to be, and for whatever reason, I'm here. Yay!
Hey, I'm all teary-eyed over this. I just think, oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. So let's have a break. Let's play some music.